Hi, my name is Claire-Louise Partridge and I'm the Deputy Director for Financial Governance and Business Improvement in the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. So my role is a leadership role. I lead 4 different teams. One of the teams specifically looks at managing public money. The other teams focus on business improvement. There's always different things to do. But also the thing I really like about my job are the people that I work with. I've got a great team and really great colleagues, so I feel very privileged to be able to work with them. General day-to-day involves lots and lots of meetings and lots of emails. My inbox literally does this. So I've got lots of correspondence and lots of meetings to attend where I talk a lot. I also listen a lot. I think actually having a stammer has helped me listen much better. I'm not in a hurry to speak. Because sometimes it's more challenging. I do give lots of presentations as well. They used to make me feel quite anxious in the workplace. They don't anymore. If it's a new audience and I don't know the audience, then I sometimes feel a bit anxious about it. But I generally don't feel very anxious about it now. At university, I always wanted to be a surgeon. That was what I wanted to do, so I did my GCSEs, my A-levels. I went slightly off the rails at college, and not in a big way, but enough not to be able to study medicine at Oxford, which is what I wanted to do. So I ended up studying biological sciences, and that led me to kind of major in pathology and immunology and all those types of things. I've just kind of always followed my curiosity. The first job I had after uni, if you will, was doing a postdoc at Bristol University. So I did that and then I applied for some research money, wasn't successful in that, and wondered why. And actually then I chose to go and work at the research councils who give out the research funding to help me understand why I hadn't got the research funding in the first place. And that was a great place to work actually. I worked for the National Environment Research Council. So it was an absolutely fascinating place to work. As a person who loves knowledge, it was great. When I was working there, I wanted a bit of a change and I went to work. I went on a secondment out of the National Environment Research Council and came to work at the Environment Agency. Well, actually my daughter has a stammer. It's not as pronounced as mine and hers is fairly intermittent. She's encountering an episode of stammering at the moment. And she is so much more confident than I was at her age. She refuses to let it define her, and actually that would be my advice to anybody, would be, we're all born with something amazing to give the world. We don't usually know what that is, and we usually happen upon it, but don't let your stammer or anything for that matter, get in the way of you discovering what that is. So a story I sometimes tell about communication actually is when I was a postdoc researcher, I had to speak at a big international conference. And in these days, you didn't have kind of PowerPoint, kind of projectors and stuff. It was all done on slides. So your audience might not be familiar with this, but we had these horrible cassettes with all these little pictures in, like photographic films. And for whatever reason, the cassette stopped working, and I was stood up in front of this enormous audience, terrified anyway, and I had to talk about this really complicated chemical signalling pathway that was obviously etched on the inside of my eyeballs because I've been living and breathing it for a couple of years. And I stood there slightly starstruck, and I really felt the fear around, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to talk. I've got no props, nothing to fall back on. It's just me and the audience. And the world felt very small at that point and very silent. And all I could see were all these faces just staring at me. And I thought, well, I've got two choices here. I can either just crumble and just make my excuses and just not do this, or I can style it out. And I remember standing there thinking, actually just running away feels like the best option right now, but that's really not going to help anybody and I'll feel terrible afterwards. So it took every ounce of courage that I had in me to look around the room and grab a flip chart and some pens and literally start to draw this signalling pathway. And I was quite animated in a slightly Johnny Ball kind of fashion. Actually the presentation went down a storm. And I think the feedback I got afterwards was actually, it was really authentic. It was a really authentic presentation and they saw me, warts and all. And they saw me hesitate, they saw me stammer, but because I was confident in the topic that I was talking about, I was able to carry it off, and that's something which I use now. I prepare really well for presentations. I know that I stammer a lot more in a presentation when I don't feel like I understand what I'm talking about. So I work really hard to understand what I'm talking about and feel confident about answering questions, so that I don't kind of feel that anxiety around it. But it was pretty scary. Okay, so obviously working in the department, I'm really lucky. My colleagues are very supportive, my employer is very supportive. I actually lead the Stammering network within the department, and that's a real privilege. That's a real privilege because I get to hear so many people's stories, and actually I've got an opportunity to help them. I think generally, if I would say, how does it feel to work in this civil service? It's actually a great place to work, although it's a busy place to work. It's a very supportive and positive place to work. I think throughout my career I have experienced times where I've encountered people who may have not reacted in a way that I felt necessarily was very positive. I've had people say, oh, have you forgotten what you're going to say? And things like that. And I've always been quite assertive around that. My response tends to be, yes, I do know what I'm going to say, I just require you to be patient. Or I'll say, actually I've got a stammer and I'm just struggling to speak right now. I've never found a person who didn't pause and reflect on their attitude and apologise and allow me to just carry on the conversation. So if my 13-year-old self could see me now, what would they say? They would probably say, I look a bit old, which is what my daughters would probably tell me. I think I would definitely see a version of me that is still me, and the fact that I still live by some of my really core values around fairness, equality and inclusion. I think they'd feel proud of what I'd achieved. Yes and no. It certainly made me stop and think about some of the choices that I've made. It stopped me from applying for the speaking parts in the school plays, even though I love performing. It made me really anxious about that. But has it ever stopped me from doing anything? No. If my mum were here, which she's not, she would tell you that Claire-Louise is quietly determined, and that's very true. And whilst my stammer can sometimes feel like something I need to consider, I absolutely will not let it define me. One of the people in our stammering network asked me, would I like to be without my stammer? I thought really long and hard about that question and thought actually probably for years I probably would have said yes, I desperately do not want to stammer. But actually it's helped to shape who I am. It's made me more thoughtful, it's made me more reflective, it's made me appreciate the importance of the words that I use. I'd feel lost without it. And I have great, really fluent days, and I have other days where I really cannot string two words together. At the end of the day, I thought to myself, how do I still feel about answering that question, would I be without my stammer? And for me the answer is no. Actually I think it's an important part of who I am, and I'm comfortable with it, and I think other people should be too.